Blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO.
It's a shame that our country had to go through this. To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this before I even got elected. It began. And it began illegally. And hopefully somebody's going to look at the other side. This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side.
There we have it, the remarks of President Trump following the Mueller report, the report to Congress. With us now for analysis, our great friend, nationally syndicated talk show host, Lars Larson. You can catch him weeknight 6 to 9 on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Lars.
Good morning, Kevin. And you'll notice if you take a look at the position of all the Democrat lawmakers in the Northwest, I know that Idaho is blissfully free from as many as Oregon and Washington have to put up with, but they all took positions literally years ago, saying we now know for a fact there was collusion with Russia to affect the outcome of the election. And now, after $25 million and 22 months of investigation and literally thousands of subpoenas served, hundreds of search warrants served, hundreds of people examined, tens of thousands of pages of documents, Robert Mueller couldn't find enough to bring a single indictment against Donald Trump or his senior campaign staff, or any of his campaign staff, frankly. He got some Russians who were in the country who were trying to mess with our social media, but they made a point. Rod Rosenstein, the deputy at DOJ, said none of this connects back to Donald Trump. So after 2 years of telling us that this was a fact and all they needed to do was gather the evidence, they put almost 20 lawyers, dozens of other staff, and $25 million of the taxpayers' money into an investigation that couldn't find it.
And yet it doesn't seem to be enough for them. They continue on. Jerry Nadler, Maxine Waters, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, they seem to be ready to turn on Robert Mueller.
Well, they're ready to turn on anybody, and here's why. The day after the election, the Democrats and the liberals in this country announced their intent to take down this president, illegally if they had to. Hillary Clinton had used the Steele dossier illegally. It was the product of Democrat money paid to Russian government officials and then information gathered by Christopher Steele, the former British secret agent, that's mostly debunked. I don't know of any of it that anybody can point to that's real. That was a real effort to adversely affect the outcome of the election. And that was Hillary Clinton in cahoots with the Russians. Mueller specifically did not even look at that. What he looked at was Trump. And are they ready to continue? They were ready the day after Trump was elected to impeach him. Why? Because they didn't like the choice made by the American people. The American people chose Donald Trump. And the Democrats said, we don't like that choice. And we will keep him from taking the oath. Remember when they said that? We will, if he does take the oath, we will take him down. We will impeach him. They've now given up on that. We'll prove that he colluded with Russians. Well, they haven't given up on that yet, but they just had the best investigation money could buy, including, I think, a politically biased Robert Mueller, who came up with nothing. It's a big, fat nothing burger. So, the fact that he didn't even say, well, there appears to have been some law violations by the president or by other folks. In fact, I was just looking at a statement from Senator Ron Wyden, who's one of the Northwest congressional delegation. He doesn't actually live here. He lives in New York City, but he's officially a U.S. Senator from Oregon. This is from almost 2 years ago, July of 17. He says, these emails show there is no longer a question of whether this campaign sought to collude with a hostile foreign power to subvert America's democracy. The question is, how far does the coordination go? It is now up to elected officials of both parties to stand up and do their duty, protect and defend the Constitution. He had already decided 2 years ago that that Donald Trump was guilty. He decided before the investigation that Donald Trump had done the crime or that people had done it on his behalf in the Trump campaign. The only question was, did the president actually know about it? They wanted to go back to the Richard Nixon, what did the president know and when did he know it? and they didn't get it. But they had decided at the beginning. It's almost like, do you remember Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll?
Right.
The Queen of Hearts says, sentence first, trial later.
Well, and we take a look at the comments of Andrew McCabe, and, he's revealing this in his public statements that when James Comey was fired, rightfully so, James Comey, Lars, saying that he leaked to make sure there was a special prosecutor. Yep. Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, not the most reliable folks, but even Lisa Page saying that, there's nothing there, and they continue to go after the president.
Because they needed what they called an insurance policy, because they realized if Donald Trump became president, that all the things they'd been doing, not just during the election, but before the election, and all the things Hillary Clinton had been doing were going to be outed. And that's a real danger. It threatens an awful lot of people. And, Kevin, let me tell you something that ought to strike fear into the hearts of any American, and I don't think I'm exaggerating this. You know who Dr. Jerome Corsi is, Jerry Corsi?
Our great friend.
Right. He's been on my show. He's been on your show. He's a good guy. And what happened was just a couple of months ago, Robert Mueller's team threatened him and said, we will prosecute you, and since you're in your 70s, we will effectively give you a life in prison sentence, a death sentence behind bars, if you do not tell us the things we want to hear. And Dr. Corsi, who has more guts than an awful lot of people I know, said, I will not do it. Now, you think, well, then he must have done something wrong if the prosecutor was threatening him. Turns out that with the filing of this report, no more indictments, which means Jerome Corsi is not going to be indicted. So if Robert Mueller honestly believed 2 months ago that Jerry Corsi had committed crimes, he would have, at the end of his report, said, by the way, you need to indict Corsi on this, this, and this, and send him to prison. If Corsi had not had the stones to say, I'm not going to sit and make up stories for you to save my own skin and take a guilty plea, I've done nothing wrong. Turns out Jerry Corsi was right. But, Kevin, imagine this. Somebody in your audience gets picked up by the police, and they say, we are going to indict you, and we are going to drag you through a trial. And you say, but I didn't do anything wrong. I'll win. And they'll say, yeah, but by the time you win, we will have ruined your life. So here's your choice. Take a guilty plea and confess to that you did not do, or we will drag you through hell. And then at the end of the day, you find out the police didn't have anything. So I asked the prosecutor, now retired prosecutor, friend of mine, Kevin, Josh Markey, who just retired last year as a prosecutor of 25 years. I said, is that ethical to threaten? Now, the police are allowed to lie to suspects, but lawyers are different. Lawyers are officers of the court. And I know people would say, what does that mean? It means that you can't knowingly put somebody on the stand who's going to lie. You can't knowingly lie to the court, to a jury. You cannot lie. So I asked him, is it ethical for a prosecutor to threaten somebody with prosecution when he doesn't have a very good case? He said, Lars, it's worse than that. He said a prosecutor cannot ethically threaten somebody if they do not have a case they believe will stand up in court, meaning it will stand up against America's standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high standard, and we set that standard deliberately to protect citizens from this kind of garbage, where, imagine that anybody in your town, if a prosecutor were to act as unethically as the Mueller investigation did, saying, we are desperate. We've spent 2 years. We've spent $25 million. We've come up with nothing. If we squeeze Kevin Miller hard enough and threaten him, Kevin, you'll either sing, not only sing, but as my friend Andy McCarthy says, compose, meaning make something up. And if you don't make up a story good enough on the person we're really after, we're going to drag you and your family and everybody around you through hell. And lesser people cave into that. So he didn't. He said, I won't do it. And I thought, well, when they finally issue the report, if they really have a case on him, remember, Mueller was supposed to have had a case on him, or he couldn't make that kind of threat, then he'll be indicted. No indictment, which means Mueller was bluffing. You say, well, bluffing's okay. Bluffing's okay in poker. Bluffing's even okay for police investigators. They are, in fact, by the courts, allowed to lie to a suspect, to tell him things that aren't true in order to get information. Prosecutors and officers of the court are not allowed to do that. Robert Mueller did it. That's how really terribly corrupt this investigation was. And even with all that corruption, even with all those pro Hillary Clinton lawyers that were hired by Mueller, I mean, people who had actually worked for the Clinton Foundation, so their loyalties are very suspect. I mean, I love the J.R. Simplot company. I think the world of that company. But imagine if you were going to have somebody investigate from the DA's office, J.R. Simplot company, big company in Idaho. Would you hire a lawyer to investigate them who had some prior beef or bone to pick with Simplot? Would you say, let's get this guy whose family business was, adversely affected, maybe even destroyed because of the business activities of Simplot. Let's hire him to investigate Simplot. No, you don't do that. You hire somebody who has no dog in the fight. And in fact, in many cases, police chiefs like the Boise police chief or the Boise sheriff, if his men or women, deputies, are under investigation, he can't afford to have his own investigators do it. So he may call the Coeur d'Alene Police Department and say, send me down an investigator who doesn't have any ties to the Boise community. I need them to look into one of my officers, and I can't afford to have people say, well, you use somebody who has a bias, who has a dog in the fight. So send me somebody. They might even reach as far away as Seattle or Portland. They send me out a police lieutenant who's a detective. I want him to look at this so that when we come up with a report, it's clean. Robert Mueller's investigation was not clean. It was designed to take down the presidency of Donald Trump, and by doing so, take away the votes of more than 60 million Americans who chose this man as president. That's evil.
Our great friend Lars Larson joining us, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Catch him tonight at 6 following Sean Hannity. So, Lars, back to this whole Strzok, Page, McCabe, Comey thing. What's the fallout from this? Comey admitting he leaked to get the special prosecutor, which was much ado about nothing, wasting $25 million.
What should happen is that Strzok should be charged, Page should be charged, McCabe should be charged. And I mean, do an investigation and determine that these people were acting as political actors, misusing their authority within the Justice Department, and they should be investigated. Hillary Clinton should be investigated, and let me tell you specifically for what. Number one, destruction of public documents, which she admits she did. That is a federal crime. Okay, destruction of public documents, mishandling of classified information. Now, you say, well, the statute of limitations has passed. It probably has. But what I'd really like to see them go after is the real Russia collusion. And let me describe it quickly. Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid $16 million through a cutout, a law firm in Seattle. If you wanted to spend some money, Kevin, and have it be camouflaged, say it was for a good purpose, say Kevin Miller, wants to give some money to his former high school, but he doesn't want anybody to know about it. You could call a law firm in Portland or Seattle and say, hey, look, I'd like to make a donation. It's for the right reasons, but I want to make it in such a way that nobody can trace it back to me for whatever reason, right? You don't want the notoriety or whatever. So you call the law firm, and the law firm contacts your school and says, hey, listen, there's a donation coming in. Who's it from? We can't tell you, but it's a very generous donation to your high school. And it's all clean. It's all from legal purposes. Well, what Hillary Clinton and the DNC did was dirty as all get out. They hired a Seattle law firm, said, we want you to hire Fusion GPS, which is an Oppo research company that does research on your opponent. They hired Fusion GPS, who then hired Christopher Steele, who then went to his former Russian contacts and paid them money to craft the Steele dossier. It was used to justify the investigation of Donald Trump. It was used to justify the wiretapping of Carter Page, an American citizen who was wiretapped. Now, you want to be afraid in America? Be afraid of a government that's willing to wiretap its own citizens based on what they knew at the time was phony evidence, made-up evidence created by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. That's an evil government. When you start letting governments get away with that kind of thing, you end up with a government no better than Venezuela or Castro's Cuba or the old Soviet Union. where the government can simply conspire against its own citizens. That's wrong.
Lars, we look forward to catching you today. And, of course, as always, on LarsLarson.com. You have a great one, sir.
Hey, and you as well, Kevin. Take care.
Our great friend Lars Larson joining us. Your thoughts next on the Mueller report and the presidency. And we'll do a little rewind as well. Remember when the media said they were going to haul the president out in handcuffs? If you don't remember, we'll have that reminder for you next. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go to Tom in Boise. Tom, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Not bad. And you?
Good. I'm a resident of Boise for 3 weeks. I left Medford, Oregon.
Welcome.
And we've been waiting for years to come here, but I wanted to just talk. I heard one lady say that all the teenagers in Idaho will be smoking marijuana. In Medford, the Oregon Health Authority did a study county by county. I've been very up on the marijuana laws and the impacts with police enforcement and other things as this whole thing is unfolding in Oregon. I did not move here to recreate Oregon politics. The Oregon Health Authority discovered that the increase of marijuana smoking of teenagers in their junior and senior years in the high schools has increased, and there's between 25 and 30% using marijuana. And the law created an environment in which, even though it's illegal for them to smoke, the law passing gave them the idea that it was kind of okay. So not everybody is going to be smoking marijuana, but it will increase the usage by teenagers. The other unintended consequence of a really bad idea, if you're not prepared as a state to deal with it, is that the insurance companies have now recognized that the legalization of marijuana has created an increase in traffic accidents and deaths, and they've raised the cost of insurance for your car on every single car driver in the state of Oregon. The other issue is that Medford was a great place to live. We lived there for 24 years. It's become the 39th most crime-ridden city in the U.S. As a result of drug legalization and being near California, we started seeing, and I have friends who have, rural properties and other things, crime, gangs, and tremendous amounts of homelessness. And it took the city that we lived in to a completely degraded lifestyle. And people rave about it, but again, it depends on what you're looking for. So the approach that the Idaho legislature is taking, or should take, is cautious, because they have no idea of the unintended consequences that will occur if this is legalized without the proper preparation. The other cost that we took on, and nobody anticipated, was the extra law enforcement and court time it would take because of the overload in the system. And there is no regulation, or there is no way to tell whether marijuana is in a system of a person, because everybody's physiology is different. The problem that they've run into is that with alcohol, pretty much, if you're smart, you don't drive late Friday nights and New Year's Eve and other things. But the officer in charge of marijuana legalization and control in the Medford Police Department, who I spoke with, said, Tom, the problem with marijuana is that these people get up in the morning and smoke, or they get home from work on whatever shift and smoke, and they still go out in their cars, and you don't know what time of the day they're on the road. So you've created another impact of society that is just, to me and to my wife, unacceptable. So I would just caution the people that might be listening here, and I could take an entire show of yours and talk about all of the unanticipated consequences. And I also believe, coming out of the financial industry, as I've analyzed where the costs are coming from, that for every dollar of taxes collected by every county and city that jumps in and grabs this, there's an equal dollar paid by the tax holders in costs to manage the system through insurance, medical costs, court costs, and everything else. It's an algebraic equation on both sides, and both sides are equal. So there is no benefit to the state. It's simply a cost shift of cost to the society for the state to collect taxes to, quote, do infrastructure and all these other great things. But what happens to the state, it's not so great.
Well, Tom, thank you. Call back again, and welcome to Idaho.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. And those are the reasons why we continue to say no to drugs here in Idaho, no to marijuana. Very factual, very matter of fact, what happens when you legalize the dope. You turn the gem state into the dope state. Not on our watch. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio.
I'm just Channel 7's Eric Gebert.
And I'm Kevin Miller. More of your calls concerning the Mueller report, legalization, and other news of note next with me on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Don't forget, coming up this week, it's back. Win Kevin Miller's cash. Listen at during the 6 o'clock hour, the 8 o'clock hour, and the 3 o'clock hour with Sean Hannity. And your chance to win big money coming very soon. Once again on KIDO Talk Radio, win Kevin Miller's cash. That's coming up. Also, taking your calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO concerning the president being exonerated. Of course, people are saying, though the president of the United States, he's not exonerated, going back to attacking the Attorney General, William Barr, now going on to attack Robert Mueller. The crazy, wacky, zany libs, they just don't take no for an answer.
It's a shame that our country had to go through this. To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this before I even got elected. It began. And it began illegally. And hopefully somebody's going to look at the other side. This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side.
There you have it, an illegal takedown that failed. Currently, Mike Pence, the vice president, speaking now. We'll get to his comments. But first, we go live to the White House, only on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Your home for Fox News in the Treasure Valley. John Decker joins us. John, good morning.
Good morning to you, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Not bad. Not as good as the president, it would appear.
Well, he is pretty jubilant, as is the rest of the White House, after the conclusion of the Mueller investigation, no longer hanging over the head of this White House, no longer hanging over the head of this president. And I saw Kellyanne Conway this morning, couldn't have had a bigger smile on her face. Of course, we know the conclusions based upon what the Attorney General has put out in that 4-page letter to Congress. The conclusion, there was no evidence that President Trump colluded with Russia. According to Bill Barr, Robert Mueller reached no conclusion about whether the president obstructed justice. That being said, the president does indeed feel vindicated by this report.
Of course, Congress doesn't feel vindicated, at least some congressional Democrats saying they want to haul the Attorney General up for hearings, possibly Robert Mueller as well. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that's their prerogative. The House of Representatives is controlled by Democrats, the House Intelligence Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, the House Oversight Committee, all controlled by Democrats. And as a result, they are disappointed. They thought this was going to be the smoking gun that would lead the way to impeachment against the president. And that is not the case. But their investigations will continue. And I don't know, obviously, as no one else does, where those investigations will lead. But that's the reason why I don't think that Rudy Giuliani's job is complete, is finished in terms of serving as a lawyer for the president.
John Decker joining us, Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller in the morning. When we take a look at putting this all in perspective, a lot of folks that, unlike you, John Decker, weren't covering the Ken Starr investigation, weren't covering the Monica Lewinsky situation, weren't covering impeachment in real time as it happened, trying to make the comparison to what Ken Starr did under the old independent prosecutor statute to what Robert Mueller's mission was as a special prosecutor. Do they have a point, or are they missing something when they're comparing Starr's report to the Mueller report?
Well, different laws controlled each of those particular independent / special counsels, and as a result, with Ken Starr's investigation, what you had was a mandate that his investigation be turned over to Congress, and then you had Congress in turn, once they received it, within 24 hours voting to make it public. There's not that same type of law that's in place as it relates to Mr. Mueller. The only requirement is for him to make that report available to the Attorney General, and then it's up to the Attorney General as to what he wants to do in terms of making that report available to members of Congress and ultimately making it available to the public as well. So a lot of this really depends on Bill Barr. He will likely be called to testify before the House Judiciary Committee in the aftermath of the Mueller report being concluded, and we'll hear a little bit more from him in terms of what it is that he intends to do. No matter what, there will be redactions associated with this report. Redactions because of classified material being in that report, and redactions also because you have grand jury testimony within the report, and none of that can be released because that would be a violation of federal law.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people seem to be missing is you can't release everything.
No, you can't. And so there will be redactions. Of course, that will not please Democrats who, like I said, are disappointed by the results of Mr. Mueller's report. But that's the law, unless you change the law that Mr. Mueller, Mr. Barr must abide by it, and that's the reason why there will indeed be redactions if that report is turned over to Congress.
John Decker, anything else we should be looking out for concerning the fallout of the Mueller report this week, sir?
Well, we're hearing from the Vice President today. He spoke within the past few minutes to APEC, the annual conference that happens here in Washington, and in that, he says that the Attorney General confirmed that there was no obstruction of justice. That's different, of course, than what Mr. Mueller concluded in terms of his report, but certainly I think that you could describe the mood here at the White House as one of jubilation because a dark cloud has certainly been lifted from this White House that has hung over this White House over almost the past 2 years.
John Decker, we always appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Have a great day.
You too. Our great friend John Decker joining us. Tea Party Bob, Gem State Patriot. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. How are you today?
I am with the president. How dare they do this to my president? How dare they try to take him down? And he is completely vindicated.
I'm just curious why you haven't had any calls from your liberal listeners today. Are they somewhat frustrated, possibly?
I think we only have one liberal listener, and he's on sabbatical or pouting or something.
Now that Mueller's report is over after 2 years of investigating and $25 million, the Democrats have decided to disregard the whole darn thing on their witch hunt for Red October. They have nothing else to talk about except socialism, so they will continue to use the premise that Trump is guilty of something, but they're just not sure what yet. They're going to continue the mantra to impeach him, but I think the public's going to get very tired of this very quickly, and the independent voters are slowly but surely just going to turn on the Democrats, and they're going to see this turn take place within the next few months. Trump's approval ratings are going to go up, and we're going to see a big move in his popularity ratings. Now it's now time to do the real investigation that should be taking place and should have been taking place on who is responsible for all of this. And when all is said and done, I believe they're going to find out the whole contrived action against Trump was indeed the brainchild of former President Obama and his group of henchmen who are being protected by the deep state establishment. That's one of the reasons we're continuing to see this go on and on. They can't relent, otherwise it would push itself into finding out what actually happened. And that's the real threat to the Democrats. The other threat is going to be an investigation into the Clintons and hopefully Uranium One situation where they actually did collude to take uranium from us and give it to the Russians for their own profitability. Our government has become like the U.S. mafia cesspool, representing those who pay the most money for their services. And the more you pay, the more you get the privilege of breaking our laws without any repercussions. Trump overturned the apple cart because he's a businessman who saw how these slime balls were screwing the people of our country. And if he gets another 4-year term, we might actually be able to turn this ship around. And just one quick comment about hemp. I just have to tell you, hemp is not marijuana, and hemp is not a segue to smoking marijuana. Hemp is a valuable economic commodity, and it should be permitted to be grown, not just in this state, but in every state in the country.
Well, you've heard from the experts this morning.
I've heard from the experts, and nobody has said don't grow hemp. Everybody said let's just formulate laws that make it comfortable for everybody. Hemp is a good product, and hemp is something that has 26,000 uses. I mean, why would you turn something like that down?
Well, we could go on, but I'd rather not.
I know we could, but we don't want to do that, right?
Tea Party
Great
Bob.
show this morning. Thank you. Thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you. You take care.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Let's take a listen to how the libs were making their big predictions concerning what would happen. This happened Thursday and Friday of last week. And we'll get to that. Phone numbers here. You know them well, 580-5436, 580-KIDO.
He is going to be delivering what I think are going to be his indictments, the final indictments.
I would not be surprised if there were a number of indictments that still were going to come down the pike.
There are indictments in this president's future.
That's a bombshell.
The bombshell.
This bombshell.
Drop the bombshell.
Bombshell accusation.
Bombshell accusation.
This is evidence of willingness to commit collusion.
If this BuzzFeed News report is true, then we are likely on our way to possible impeachment proceedings.
If this story is true, we must begin impeachment proceedings.
This is suborning perjury. I think there's no question it's an impeachable offense.
And at that point, we are in high crimes and misdemeanor, and we are in impeachment territory.
Right. This president needs to be impeached.
Impeachment is the remedy. I mean, the president can't...
It's the only remedy. The spirit of what Trump did is clearly treasonous.
This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
There's outright treason. I mean, there is no question.
I think he's feeling the noose around his neck.
The noose is tightening, and I think they're shocked that the noose is tightening.
There you have it. The noose is tightening. More coming up next. Why don't we, let's go to hear what you have to say. Let's go to Hank in Boise with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. I think that the large part of this investigation was to stop any kind of smokescreen on the uranium-2 deal. I concur with Tea Party Bob. Mueller was FBI director at the time when this deal went down. He and Rosenstein played roles in okaying this, and there were violations of law, and also I think that they have criminal liabilities of their own in this. And the problem is now after all this investigation, it's going to look like that this was because of political reasons that Trump is going to go after, or the Justice Department will go after Mueller. Mueller and the Democrats will spin it that way when there is really justifiable reasons to prosecute these two birds. And the whole point of the smoke screen was that it kept, and as Tea Party Bob mentioned in his call, and I hardly concur, the point of the investigation was to keep the focus away from both the President Obama, but also to stop any investigation of the Clintons, to tie up any kind of movement to look into it. And I hope that they don't get deferred on the cosmetics and do the right thing and go after these people for what they did. It's not just the Comey and their role in this false investigation. It's also another thing that's terrible. Our uranium supply is largely now controlled by the Russians, thanks to the Clintons, and the Clintons pocketed a lot of cash in this whole business, and they need to be prosecuted. And Mueller and Rosenstein need to be prosecuted for their role in enabling this. So that's my point.
All right, Hank, thank you for the call. We go to Brian in Nampa. Good to see you on Friday, Brian. Good morning.
Yeah, I was going to say that, too. I'm glad I finally got to meet a brother Miller. So, anyway. Hank stole all my steam, Kevin. I'm kind of, he did a great job, but I'll add one thing. Criminals. You'll learn that the advanced criminals that never get caught have a little tactic. And what they do is they get a lesser criminal to go do a distraction to draw the cops' attention. so they can get away with their crime. If that isn't what the Democrats have been doing for the last 2 years, just like Hank said, I don't know what else you call it. And again, you can go back to that book, The Games Criminals Play and How to Profit by Knowing Them, so you all learn this ladder that they use to deceive you. I would highly encourage people to do that. But, yeah, this has just been a pony show to hide what's really been going on. And Hank does a great job. He stole a lot of my thunder, so I give him kudos for that.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but the Democrats continue to move on with this. They're not done.
Yeah, and let me just say something about the hemp thing, okay? If the police can't deal with marijuana because we legalize hemp, I'm not okay with it. The police force is right. There needs to be a plan. And if, was it Kentucky did it right, so hemp could be legalized? I do agree with Bob that it can be used for a lot of good things. But if that's creating an issue, we need to work that out legally before we legalize it. But I still think eventually we should legalize it.
Brian, thank you for the call, Brother Miller. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller rolling right along right before Glenn Beck on KIDO Talk Radio.
The noose is tightening.
The sound of hoofbeats of all those investigations catching up with Donald Trump must be loud in his ears.
He may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
People might go to jail
You're exactly right.
for the rest of their lives.
I think they're all going to jail. Well, I think they're all going to end up together in prison, and maybe that's a good thing. Oh, my God.
He has no idea that he's going down.
You're confident that at least some Trump associates will wind up in jail?
If I was betting, I would say yes.
Donald Trump Jr. gave us the dots. All we have to do is to connect them to see where this is going.
And there we have it. The crazy, wacky, zany libs predicting that the president would be impeached, that people would be hauled out before the public from the White House. You take a look at this. Rachel Maddow was crying on Friday night, and whether you disagree with someone or not politically, you don't want this for the country. And what we see now with Jerry Nadler, what we see now with these people, we really don't even know who they are, is now, well, there's no collusion, but he wasn't exonerated. There's no this, but it doesn't mean that he's innocent. And now we're going to continue to look. This is why people don't get involved in politics. Now, how many times have we said, oh, if only a good person ran for politics? When we treat someone who has no real agenda to benefit themselves, gets into politics, this is how the libs treat this man. Donald Trump, making America great again. Oh, that's racist. Really? How is that racist? Well, we're going to throw things up there and see if something sticks. Maxine Waters. You know, there's a clip, and we'll share it with you coming up this week, where Maxine Waters is celebrating one of her staffers, calling the Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin the Kremlin clan. Really? Is that a responsible statement from a member of Congress? And now the new buzzword is transparency. We want everything. Well, you can't have everything because you have federal law saying the grand jury testimony is not applicable. It won't be revealed. But that doesn't stop the crazy, wacky DLLs, the devious little libs, from making their goofy, irresponsible public statements.
I don't want a summary of the report. I want the whole damn report, because nobody, especially this president, is above the law.
Oh, Bernie, whatever happened to the presumption of innocence, little Bernie? Traffic and weather together. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio.